The following is a paid program. Advice and opinions expressed on the program are solely that of Jung's Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands. Welcome in, everybody, to Taking Care of Business today, featuring the Garden Doctor, or I guess in this case, the Garden Doctor adjacent. We've got Bob Zondag on hand with us today, and Dick still recovering from the knee surgery, I'm guessing.
Right. Yes, he is. And,
is it killing him to not be able to get out and plant?
it is killing him that is spring, and he is immobile. Yeah.
I can imagine.
And I think that his son has pulled something that Richard would never have approved of if he was there. They're having a horrendous sale. Everything in the bare root room, in the bare root bins, is $10 or less. Now, fruit trees normally can be priced up around $35. Now, $10. It's well below our cost. They just have a surplus of them. They're trying to move them out. So if anyone's looking to start an orchard, this is the time. This is the place to start.
Well, there you go. And, of course, we know the Garden Doctor and the team there, Jungs, have given us great advice in the past on how to grow and maintain those fruit trees so that you can produce some fruit on your property. And you guys will be more than happy to help with advice on how to properly plant those if somebody does want to get a mini orchard going.
Sure, and they also have the flowering crabs and other landscape trees, bushes, things like that. So I don't think they will see sales like this again. At least, Dick is mobile, so they should get to the garden center now while they get this wonderful sale.
There you go. Definitely want to take advantage of that. Now, of course, the reason we have you on is not just talk about all the great deals and sales that are going on over there, even if Dick isn't fully in control of them, but also because people like to call up and ask questions about what's going on.
Let's have them.
We definitely want to welcome that. So if you want to give us a call and talk to the Garden Doctor adjacent, the replacement, I don't want to say, you've been doing this a while. You're not an intern or anything.
No, I was raised in the company, and I have over 25 years of experience. So.
Well, there you go. So we'll say full-on Garden Doctor here, Bob. If you want to talk to Bob, ask him some questions, you can call in. 920-885-4446 is the main line. You can also call or text us at 920-887-9595, where Jeff Hall is on hand and ready to let us know what your texts say, or to let us know if we have a call. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you've got there. I did want to ask, because I always hear we talk about in the spring the bare roots. And I know that can be trees and things. Are there other plants that fall into that category?
Yes, you got bare root evergreens, you got bare root landscape plants, you got, like you said, the fruit trees and fruit bushes, landscape material. So there's quite a few things. And a lot of people don't understand what bare root is, because there isn't a lot of companies dealing in bare root. Because we are a mail order company, we do a lot of bare root. And bare root is basically where you dig the plant in the fall of the year after they go dormant. You put them into a refrigerator so they remain dormant until spring. You pull them out individually and sell them, and they take them home. Nice part about it is you aren't hauling a big clump of dirt home. You're carrying a bare root plant, so you can put quite a few into a car as opposed to needing to bring a truck or something. You take it home, you plant it back in, and it's nice because you can arrange the roots so they go in a direction they want, as opposed to potted plant. They're going to be already potted for you. And away they go. They break buds, and they will start growing. You want to do it in the spring of the year, so they have a year to the summer to grow into this thing, and away you go. Now, my son's got a small orchard, and all his trees were planted bare root. I have a number of flowering crabs in my yard. They're all were planted bare root. I prefer bare root because I can direct the roots and make sure they're planted properly.
Now, with you guys doing a lot of stuff mail order, does that make it more stable for the postal process then? Is that why you go that route?
Well, you don't send a big ball of dirt, and so the cost of postage is much less.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
As far as getting it started, is it just as simple as I take it home and I stick it in the ground, or do I have to do any prep work to get it to prepare
normally
itself?
with any deciduous plant, you would soak it in a bucket of water from 12 to 24 hours. I recommend adding a little root stimulator to the water that stimulates root growth. You plant it, and away it goes. Yes, it's very simple. A very simple thing to do.
Now, how big are these bare root? Like, let's say I go with some fruit trees. I want to get a couple of apple trees or a pear or something. Are these, 2 foot, 3 foot tall, or are these
3 to 5 foot on the trees, the shrubs will be from 12 to 24 inches. So it is very easy to move them and very easy to take them along. People are always amazed at the convenience of a bare root. But bare root is only sold, like I say, in the April, May. It's best to get them as early as possible, put them in the ground. Right now, they're breaking bud and everything, but you could have planted it as early as the first part of April because the plants are dormant, and they will set the roots before they set the buds on the top. And so away you go.
Now, let's set some realistic expectations for people. If I go and buy a bunch of apple trees, obviously this fall I'm not getting apples.
No, depending upon whether you have a standard or dwarf or semi-dwarf, depends upon the amount of years it will take to eat apples. Normally, if a semi-dwarf tree, which is the largest selling trees we have, you would expect to be getting apples in three to 4 years.
Okay.
With a standard, you're going to be 3 to 5 years. With a dwarf, it's about the same time, about 3 years.
Now, if somebody's looking to pick up some sort of fruit tree for their yard and they want to get, I guess maybe the fastest possible harvest off of it, is there something that's better? Like, do cherries do better, or plums or anything like that? Or is that pretty standard, that 3-5+ year?
Well, it is fairly standard for most of the fruit trees. Now, some of the trees are a little older; they might have been carried over, and so. It's pretty standard, and the spraying schedule wouldn't start until you have fruit, of course. But 2-3 years is pretty standard for most of the trees. A little longer for standards if they're going to have standards.
Now, with something like this, where it's fresh roots going into the ground, is there any planting that like prep or work we should think about doing? Should we add anything to the soil as we're putting it in? Do we have to worry about staking or any of that?
Actually, the mending of the soil can be important depending upon what kind of soil you have around Randolph and Beaver Dam and so on and so forth. Most of the soil is very good around here. Recommend maybe putting a little peat moss with the soil, maybe a third peat moss, 2/3 of the black soil. If you got real sandy soil, maybe a little more peat moss. But with bare root, it is not that fussy, and away you go. The one thing you might know about trees is that a lot of people plant them too deep. The first root on a fruit tree or land, because people planted them too deep, and so you can plant them shallow. For instance, raspberries too should be planted very shallow.
Now, is there no worry then about the roots getting to a diameter where they're gonna, pop out of the ground? I know I worry about hitting the roots with the lawnmower or whatever.
Well, if you're planting maples, they do love to have their roots above ground, and so you're going to have to expect that.
Right.
But with the fruit trees, no.
Good to know. Good to know. Let's talk a little bit more about our lawns, because we've got a teammate here, Wade Bates, on the morning show.
Yeah.
He is questioning a spot on his lawn where they had a trampoline, and the ground and everything got really compressed down, and the grass was gone, and they had like sand there, I think. So he mixed in some soil, threw some grass seed, and now he's got grass seed growing, but it's not as thick as he'd like it to be.
Yeah.
And I know he was questioning, do I just go throw a bunch more down? What do I do?
Well, first of all, you have to be aware of the type of grass seed you're buying. Grass seed is one of these things that you can doctor up in a lot of ways. In any grass seed mix, there's ryegrass, there's fescues, and there's bluegrass. Bluegrass by far is the best grass as far as thickness. The soccer fields, for instance, would be mainly bluegrass.
Right.
And so you want to make sure you get a good mix when you do it. You don't want a lot of the hard fescues. Hard fescues would be coarse grass.
Right.
Now, the only time you can affect the soil is when you first plant the grass. And so what Wayne probably should have done is to work up the soil, and if it's grass, amend the soil with some either dark soil or some peat moss, and then put the grass seed down. Grass seed comes up in like stages. They put ryegrass into a grass mix because it comes up very quickly. But ryegrass is not hardy for our area. It will die out of winter, even if it's a perennial rye.
Right.
So it's put in there as a companion plant. It holds the moisture and prevents the sun from scorching the earth. Then you have the fescues, and the fescues are especially good in shaded areas. That's why the shady mix will have a lot of fescue in. and they come up in about 2 weeks, and the bluegrass takes a full almost 3 weeks to come up. And during that time, you want to keep the soil moist at all the way through. You don't have to have it soaking in the ground, but the first couple inches of the soil should be wet almost continuously. And so, in a lot of cases, that means watering morning, watering in the evening when you come home to make sure the grass comes up properly.
Is there anything else we can think about putting down in, like I'm thinking of a spot on one of my neighbor's properties where, for whatever reason, the grass there is just not growing right. And I think he's planning on putting some stuff down. Is there anything he should put on top of that to keep that kind of, I see straw sometimes used, but
Yeah, it should be a marche too, because straw has a lot of weed seeds in it. And so you want to get a marche, because marche is grown in acidic soil, and then it won't have as many weed seeds. The biggest killer of grass is dogs. And if you see yellow patches all over your lawn and you have a dog, you know why.
Okay.
And so first thing you want to do is water that area very, very well, because they want to leach out all the urine out of the ground.
right.
And then you can go back in. If it comes back, great. If it doesn't come back, then you should probably work up that area and put down a grass seed again.
Makes sense. I am hearing from our man upstairs, Jeff Hall, that we line. Jeff, if you want to go ahead and read that text for us.
All right, good morning, everybody. Mike texts in and says, my question is about tulips. They come up, one leaf, they fall over, and no bloom. Too deep, too shallow? What else could it be?
The thing about tulips is that the larger the bulb, the larger the flower. Small bulbs will not produce flowers. So if you have gone out and you have bought a small bulb, you probably are not going to get flowers, because it will send up the leaves to try to gather food. Now, the thing about the Dutch is they have a corner on the market because their soil is cool. They have a water level very close to the surface, and so their ground remains cool, but the sun is hot, and that prevents the bulb from shattering. And that's why the Dutch have a corner on it. They can produce large bulbs. If the tulip bulb's been in the ground for 3-4 years, it's just going to be decreasing in size, because what it will do is it will shatter. So anytime you buy tulips or crocus or daffodils or any spring bulb, make sure you buy the largest size you can, because it's never going to get larger. And the larger the bulb, the better the flower, the larger the flower.
There you go. Do tulips have the ability to kind of lay, or something maybe similar to tulips have the ability to kind of lay dormant in the ground?
Tulips will bloom in the spring, gather food, and die back. And then it takes the winter to break down the barrier to produce another flower.
Another reason I ask is we have a mailbox that's on the side of the road, and first year we didn't have anything growing around it other than grass.
Okay.
And then year 2, same thing. Year 3, there was just a small patch of what I'm assuming was tulips. They looked like tulips when they came up, and I could be wrong, that just happened to show up. Just a very small patch. And that has now spread over the course of, 4 or 5 years to where there's a larger grouping of them. And we never planted them. Nobody lives on that side of the road.
Now, there are a number of bulbs will naturalize. For instance, in my lawn, I have scilla, and scilla will naturalize. They will come up, they will bloom, they set seed, and that seed will be blown into the lawn and will naturalize. So there's a lot of bulbs that will naturalize. And so more than likely what you have is a bulb that is naturalizing, and over the next couple of years it grows probably unnoticed, gathers food, and eventually will bloom. But tulips won't do that.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Let's go back into the lawn care stuff. I know the question I've been having, and we talked about it very briefly this morning, is it too soon to start mowing?
It's funny because grass is growing very vigorously. What people have to know is that we have cool weather grass in this part of the world. That grass loves temperatures in 50 to 70 degrees. And so we're right in the beautiful time of the year. The grass is really starting to grow.
Right.
You get out to the golf courses, they've already mown once or twice already. So no, it depends upon the length of your grass and depends upon whether it's long enough to mow or not. It won't hurt it. Now, fertilizing is done a great deal in the spring. Everyone thinks we're going to fertilize in the spring. And normally there's one of two fertilizers that people buy. They either buy a weed and feed or they buy a crabgrass preventer. There are two different type of applications, and people should know about that. With the weed and feed, what you're trying to do is kill any broadleaf weeds in your lawn, especially like dandelions and creeping Charlie. The weed and feed is a post-emergent. It kills after the weed emerges. And so with a weed and feed, you'd want to put it down when there's a little dew or there's moisture on the ground, so that the herbicide that's in the weed and feed will actually stick to the dandelion or creeping Charlie or whatever broadleaf you have, and it will kill it in that manner. If you spread it on a dry ground, more than likely it's just going to bounce to the ground, and you're going to wonder why it didn't kill it.
Right.
Okay. Also, the better the fertilizer, the finer the grinding of the herbicide in there. And so if you buy inexpensive fertilizer with weed feed in it, more than likely it's coarse and you aren't going to have as good results. Now, the other way of killing dandelions and broadleaves is to actually spray the lawn, and that's what I prefer. I use a Bonide weed beater solution. I go over the lawn and I spray it, and I know that it's going to contact the leaves as I spray it. Right. Therefore, it does a much better job than what a weed and feed would. And the other thing about the Weed Beater Ultra is that it doesn't take a 72-degree temperature to kill. Most commercial weed killers, if you look at the label, it says temperatures of over 72 degrees. Well, springs around here don't always give us 72-degree temperatures. And so that's why I will go to the Weed Beater Ultra. The other type of fertilizer a lot of times applied now, and now is the time to apply it because the forsythias are blooming. We always tell them to apply it when the forsythias bloom.
Right.
Is a crabgrass preventer. Crabgrass preventer has a herbicide that's a pre-emergent as opposed to post-emergent. It prevents the seed from germinating.
Right.
It has a 5 to 6 week residual. You put it down in your lawn, it forms sort of a gaseous vapor across the surface of the lawn, and it prevents the crabgrass from germinating. Crabgrass is an annual grass. It starts from seed every year. And so when you put it down, it prevents the crabgrass from starting. And it should be put down twice a year. Put it down now, and then in about 5 to 6 weeks, put it down again, because you're trying to prevent crabgrass from breaking through. And so my regimen in the spring is actually to put a crabgrass preventer with fertilizer down, and then spray the weed and feed, the weed killer down. And it works much better than the other way around.
Now, with the Weed Beater Ultra, you don't have to worry about that affecting your grass. It somehow targets just those broadleaf stuff,
It only
right?
kills the broadleaves in your lawn, right? Now, you don't want to use like a Roundup or something like that because that will kill everything.
Right.
But with the Weed Beater Ultra and a weed and feed and the fertilizers, those are all targeted just at the broadleaf in your lawn. Now, if you happen to get it on some broadleaves in your perennial bed, it will kill those too. It kills any broadleaf plant, any wider leaf plant.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about, because you mentioned Roundup. I know somebody who they had a flower bed and they said, I got a lot of weeds in it and I got a lot of flowers that I don't want in it, and I just want to start it fresh, but I don't want to go through the work of digging it out. So they just hit it with a bunch of Roundup and killed everything. Does that ruin that flower bed for a while as far as replanting?
No. Roundup is an on-contact killer. Once it hits the ground, it will not affect anything. So you normally can plant within a week after killing. And it normally takes a couple sprays because what you're killing is anything that's growing.
Right.
But you have seeds, weed seeds in that bed, and they normally will appear in another couple weeks. And so normally you want to spray at a given time, then wait a couple weeks and spray one more time, and then wait a week before you plant. And that way you'll kill off most of the weeds.
Now, is that then something that's safe to use? Like, let's say you have an asparagus bed or something, and you got a lot of weeds and things that are growing tall in that. asparagus hasn't come up yet, although I do know somebody who says theirs has. Is that something you can then spray there and it won't affect the asparagus from coming up?
I can't say.
Okay, so
Yeah,
maybe be
you have to
cautious.
check the labels. You
Okay.
can get in a great deal of trouble of doing recommendations like that, or you can talk to the county agent. Sometimes they can let you know. But the plants that Roundup can be used on is listed on the label, and you should follow those directions.
Makes sense. I mentioned asparagus, and I'm going to ask about that quick because I did see somebody posted a picture that their first asparagus spear was popping up. It was probably about 1.5 inches out of the ground at this point. I think the warmer weather is probably going to help coax
sure,
that up a
sure.
bit. Is there things we should be doing to our asparagus mounds to, like, should we be adding some additional soil? Will that be helpful at all? Or at this point, we just let them do their thing?
Asparagus you can fertilize fairly heavily, and if asparagus is grass-like, it likes a high nitrogen fertilizer, and so you can do that. Now, Richard has come up with a way of starting asparagus in pots as opposed to planting it in the ground, and he has a great video on it. If you haven't taken a look at some of the videos that Richard has done, you should, because there's a great video, and I did this last year after talking with my brother,
Right.
of planting asparagus before you plant it in the ground. So you put it in the pots, all 25, we were only supposed to be 24, but I got 25, plants grew, and I planted into the ground in the fall of the year. And so, yeah, asparagus is appearing because I know my son's asparagus, which we experimented with,
Right.
is popping up now. I've seen a couple spears come up now.
Well, there you go. I do want to remind people, if you want to give us a call, if you have a question for the Garden Doctor today, 920-885-4446, or you can call and text at 920-887-9595. Harvesting asparagus, what's the rule? Like, bigger than a pencil, your finger is okay?
Well, Richard always says bigger than your small finger.
Okay. And I'll choose mine, not the wife's, because her hands are much smaller.
And you should stop harvesting it around the middle of June, because you want some spears to come up and, of course, regenerate that asparagus for you. So you're harvesting between now and the middle of June. The spear should be the size of your small finger, and away you go. And asparagus, I love asparagus. My wife doesn't care for it, so I get all the asparagus in the family.
As a kid, I used to, in the Doylestown area, there's a train track that runs right through it. And there's a couple of hills that are near the train track. So I would walk as a kid down and cut asparagus. And I remember the one rule I was told, I don't know if this is a real rule or if it was just what my family told me, always cut it below the surface.
Yes, you want to cut right at the surface or below. You are correct. You don't want to leave the stem. And there's some great varieties, new varieties on the market that are, the male asparagus will outproduce the female asparagus by probably 3 times. And so what they're doing is they're coming up with hybrids that have almost all male asparagus, and so that it's much better at producing.
And that doesn't
and-
affect that annual return of the asparagus, does
Yeah,
it?
you get additional asparagus because of it. We on my son's farm are planting some asparagus in ditches and what have you, so that the kids can go harvest it in the spring or go look for it in the spring. We always used to do that in the ditches around Randolph too, and we always mark those areas and not tell anyone as to.
Well, there you go. And it's funny because I've mentioned before on the radio that I used to go and my dad would drive around back roads, county roads or whatever, and he'd be like, oh, there's a hill, and we'd go and cut it. He'd be like, well, you can't do that. That's the farmer's. We'd be like, we wave at the farmer waves back. Like, they know what we're doing. And like, well, they spray the ditches. We're like, well, they didn't spray that part. The asparagus was alive and well, and you wash it, you know.
Yeah, that's so true, you know. Yeah, spring's a great time. We used to go hunting pussy willows and other things that are wild, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And away you go.
There you go. The things we do as a kid.
Yep.
I do see we have a call on the line. Let's go ahead. Caller, what's your question for the Garden Doctor?
Good morning. Yes, I am just curious. I have I got some bare spots in my lawn, and I read that if I put some Miracle-Gro garden soil just in those bare spots and then put seed in there, would you recommend doing that for the nutrients that are within the Miracle-Gro? You know, in the soil, instead of just using plain old topsoil or whatever.
Well, the Miracle-Gro topsoil and any good topsoils mainly is not soil. It's basically ground sphagnum. It's decomposed moss, and so it holds moisture well. If you're going to use something like that, I would recommend about a 50% of that soil and 50% of the black soil in the ground itself. And then, the nutrients aren't the important part of that. It's that it will hold moisture better. And so, yeah, you certainly can do that.
Okay. All right.
It
But if I also
the
mix
golf
it with-
courses, will carry a mixture of that type of soil, a 50-50 type soil with grass seed mixed in it, and any of the deficits or any of the whatever you call them in golf that are empty, they'll put that mixture in and water it in, and we'll continually do that around the course to fix the course.
Okay. All right.
There you
Well,
go.
great. Thank you.
Thanks for your call. Looks like a
Sure.
golf course lawn in your future.
Well, I'm hoping.
Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
call. Have a good one. Are there things we can do? Because when I think about, and I don't spend a lot of time on the golf course because I'm a horrible golfer, but if I want to get that kind of golf course kind of feel, that thickness and, that green that they get, obviously they put a lot of work into it. Is there stuff we can do as homeowners?
Well, sure, as long as you do like the golf courses. Now, the golf courses will aerate it in the spring because getting air into ground is very important as far as grass growth. And the other thing they do is because it's so thick, they're going to have to spread a fungicide on it because grass can get funguses, especially when it gets real wet. So what you have to do then is just put down a fungicide, spray a fungicide down on your lawn to prevent it from getting fungus. And most people, aren't willing or don't want to do all that work. There is a lot of work the golf courses do to maintain that luscious green. But one of the main things that they do that most people aren't prepared to do is to put that fungicide down.
I think I'll stick with just mowing in straight lines so it looks like a golf
There
course.
you go. There
That'll
you
be
go.
good enough for me.
And the other problem too is a lot of people put down will hire a service to come and spread or spray a fertilizer on the lawn, which greens it very quickly.
Right.
And that is a fast release nitrogen, which will green your lawn very quickly, but it departs very quickly. And so when you're buying a fertilizer in the spring, I always recommend to get a slow release, something that has a fast release and a slow release nitrogen. That slow release nitrogen will carry you into the summer. Now, grass turns brown in the summer. It's not dying. It's just that it's a cool weather grass,
Right.
and it goes dormant in the summer. It doesn't go dormant in the winter. It goes dormant in the summer. And so the only way of maintaining that green grass golf course is to cool the ground. And how do you cool the ground?
I'm assuming the water.
You water it. And you water it heavy because what the water's doing isn't because the grass is so thirsty. What it's doing is cooling the soil to keep the grass green. Well, you put an amount of water on the grass, guess what? You're inviting fungus because fungus loves the hot, moist weather. And so there are things you have to do to maintain that golf course. And if people want to maintain it, that's fine. We'll be glad to help them. We have the fungicides, so on and so forth, that they can purchase. But you have to be willing to do that if you want a golf course lawn.
Yeah, I think I'll avoid that for mine. No putting greens or anything. That's fine. I'm good with that. As far as the summertime, I think kind of going more dormant, is that explaining why I seem to be mowing, in Wade Bates' case, sometimes twice a week in the spring and in the fall, but in that summer you can sometimes go 2 weeks without having to mow?
That is true. That is exactly right. You have warm weather grasses like you would find in southern part of the United States, and you have cool weather grasses up here. Our grass grows best in the spring and in the fall, not because it has more moisture, although that certainly helps, but because the grass is cooler and it grows better in the cool weather. And we choose up here to have cool weather grasses because we have cool weather.
Makes sense.
And so, yes, you're very correct. You're going to be mowing much more in the spring and into the fall. In the summer, you get to watch it brown.
Let's transition from the yard to something that I have in my yard, which is a garden. Is now a good time to start getting some stuff in the ground to get it out of the house, get it out of the pots, and
Well, now is a great time to plant the cool weather crops. Things like potatoes and onions, asparagus, and things like this. And we always recommend, and you hear in our commercials even, if you're going to put in potatoes, which a lot of people do, make sure you cut them at like a week ahead of time. Let them heal over. Let the sun callus them, so that the potato isn't going to be affected by the microorganisms in the ground. But now is a great time to plant them, and it's a fun thing to do. Now, I noticed this year in the catalog they have a potato on the top, a potato on the bottom, and tomato on the top, because they're brother and sisters, and
Right.
so they graft the tomato onto a potato, and you can grow potatoes and tomatoes in the same pot.
Interesting.
Which is fun.
And that doesn't affect the flavor of the either one or anything like
No,
that?
it doesn't affect it. In fact, when you are spraying tomatoes or potatoes, they use the same chemicals for fungus and for beetles and what have you, because they're brothers and sisters, you know.
I will say I am personally glad that they have seemingly made a lot of improvements since when I was a kid as far as pest control in the garden. Having to walk down rows in my grandfather's garden and pick potato bugs
Oh,
off.
yes.
And
Throw them in the kerosene and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. And that was not a lot of fun. I
No.
mean, as a young kid, you're fascinated by the bug for a while, and then it becomes work.
Yeah, you have some organic solutions. You have some chemical solutions, and I usually alter them by weeks as to when do I put one down, and then a couple weeks later I put the other thing down, and try to maintain the beetles in that manner. But yeah, they are a pain in the butt.
Now, not only have they come a long way with the pesticides and things like that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like they've started to kind of selectively breed the plants to be hardier and better as well, right?
Oh yes, they have. Yeah, and that's why every year you see different varieties in our catalog.
Right.
You have different All-Americans each year, and it's because of they want a longer, thinner tomato carrot, or if they want a miniature grape-sized tomato or a big, huge tomato. You know, I always told the kids when they came to the company for a tour, we have all these different type of seeds, and we got hundreds of different type of seeds in the Totally Tomato catalog, which is one of our catalogs. You have over 150 different type of tomatoes. And I just tell them we can't make up our minds which one you want, whether you want a grape tomato or a cherry tomato or a medium-sized tomato or a huge tomato, whether you want a yellow tomato or whether you want a purple tomato or, and before you know it, you got 150 types of tomatoes. Well, let's go to peppers. There's 100 varieties of peppers.
Right.
And, we can't decide whether we want a long, skinny one or a big, fat one or whether we want a hot one or one that's tasty. And, before you know it, you got a whole catalog full. So, yeah, they are breeding. Every year they come out with new things, and it sort of depends upon as to what you want. Carrots that grow in sand, of course, grow very well and can push through the sand very easily because there's a lot of air in sand. It's a lot.
Right.
Trying to grow carrots in clay is entirely different, and so a different type of seed is really better in a clay soil. So that's why they have so many different varieties. Sweet corn, there's how sweet do you want it? Do you want a bicolor? You want, it just goes on, and our people in the garden stores are all trained to be able to help with the selection. Or you can pick up on the internet or in the paper catalog as to which ones would be best.
That's awesome. We do have another call on the line. Go ahead, caller. What's your question for the garden doctor?
Hey, you guys were just talking about tomatoes, and I know I started them way too early, but I have a couple of tomato plants in my house that are about 12 inches tall, 13 inches tall. I'm itching to get them in the ground. I guess my question's twofold. When would be a good time to put them in? And also a conversation about depth planting them. I heard some people talk about really planting your root ball deep. Is there kind of a general guideline or a certain depth that they should be planted to have a healthier plant come summer and fall?
Yeah, there is. First of all, you're going to have a very tall, stringy tomato because we started them so early.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. What you should do is either to dig a deep hole or to lay it down and then curve it up. The stem that you put underground will produce roots and will produce. When you put it in the ground, the more stem you can plant, the better off you are. And that's because it will form roots for you. and then just leave a few leaves on the top, and away it goes.
Okay.
The other thing you should know is you don't want to bruise that stem of the tomato. So when you're handling a tomato, you always should hold it from the pot that it's in and then the top few leaves so you don't bruise that stem. And if you put that stem underground, like I said, it will produce roots and grow that much faster.
So if you lay it sideways, it'll just turn itself back up toward the sun. It'll just
Well,
arc
you
itself
lay
back
it
up.
sideways and then you turn the uppermost up toward the sun. You aren't burying the whole thing.
Okay.
You know,
All right.
it just means that you don't have to dig that deep a hole.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for the advice. Appreciate the show.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Let's go ahead and go right away to line 2. Another caller on. Hello, caller, John with the Garden Doctor.
Hello, yes. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling in. What do you want to know?
I apologize if this has already been addressed, but I have a small garden, but I'd like to utilize space around my house. I'm going to build a couple like small elevated beds and use some old discarded large pots. I was just wondering, as far as the soil, I kind of want to do it on the cheap side. Would just mixing topsoil and peat be enough for these vegetables that I grow? And which type of vegetables would I have the best shot of success with, not the best, pots or the best elevated bed situation?
Okay, the first thing you have to know anytime you use a pot is that you have to continuously water it every day. Okay, and so a lot of people aren't willing or going to be taking a 2-week vacation or whatever. They have to be maintained as far as water or you will have problems. The best type of soil you can use is a potting soil that is a peat mixture. Now, that means you're going to be spending more money buying the potting soil because if you buy cheap potting soil, it's just muck that they have gotten from a swamp somewhere. The good topsoils are ground sphagnum moss or ground peat moss. And if you're going to make a mixture yourself, I would use about a third of a peat and a third of a sand and a topsoil that you may have, around home. And the type of plants that I grow in pots are tomatoes, peppers. I've done some Brussels sprouts. I'm sure there's a lot more, but those are the ones I've done. And there, if you want to try it, there is a plant I was telling you about that has a tomato on the top and a potato on the bottom. Sort of a fun thing to do with your kids if you have a chance. Is there any type of vegetable that you were thinking about? Maybe I could direct you.
Well, I'm a tomato guy, so my whole garden kind of gets taken over by tomatoes. I think you were talking about all the varieties, and I get kind of suckered into getting, trying them all. Early girls are my grandpa's recommendation from when I was a kid. But I also planted some zucchini seeds, and I don't think that zucchini would be so perfect, but I was wondering if that would have a shot in the situation that
There are zucchini seeds. I don't think they have them in plants, but they have zucchini seeds that are a bush type as opposed to a vine type. And so you could grow those in pots. There's a lot of things in the catalog, and hopefully you get the catalog. If not, you can look on the internet. There's a lot of plants that are grown, a lot of seeds grown just for potting, for people that may be in a city or someplace have a small garden or whatever, that are bush-type plants as opposed to vine-type plants. And I know there is a bush-type zucchini that you could grow. And I love zucchini myself, and it's very productive. And so take a look at the seeds in the catalog and look for a bush-type zucchini. I've never grown it in a pot, but I'm sure it would be easy to do.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling.
Okay, take care.
There you go. Raised beds. I know Dick's talked about them a little bit in the past and mentioned, being able to put stuff in the bottom to kind of fill it up so you don't need nearly as much soil. And it's talked about the kind of stuff that you can grow there. It's nice for people that do have maybe back issues or can't get down on the knees and do gardening and whatever. So I can understand the benefit of those. But if we are doing a traditional in-the-ground garden, is there anything we should be doing now to prep the soil to get ready for when we are planting things like the tomatoes or, maybe it's time to get the peppers in the ground?
Well, you want to work up your soil in the spring before you plant it. And so that's either rototill or turn it with a fork or a spade. You also will turn under the weeds that have any weeds that have started. If you have a sandy soil or your soil isn't the best, then you can, what I used to do when I was up in Point is I would buy a bale of sphagnum peat moss. We'll put it in the middle of the garden and then kick it around the garden so it's spread out over the garden before I worked it in. And what that does is it helps open the soil so that it maintains more air. It also holds the moisture. And so, but around here we usually have fairly decent black soil. And other than adding a little fertilizer around the plants when you plant them, or you can spread them over the whole thing and then work it in. No, there isn't much you have to do.
Now, I live in Pinwell Pond. The soil up there is pretty sandy. I'm not too far from the Rock River. And so drainage is never really a problem.
No.
And when it rains, I definitely have plenty of water. But as far as sunlight, that is my question, because I sometimes read the labels and it says, well, this likes a lot of sun. This doesn't like a lot of sun. I don't want to plant 4 or 5 gardens around my house to supplement every plant.
Well, a rule of thumb with any vegetable producing plant is the more sun, the better the plant. And so the more sun you get for your garden, the better off you are. And a lot of people don't follow that recommendation. You know, they find a part of their yard that perhaps is out of the way or not used, and they plant it and they wonder why it isn't growing when there's a big tree overshadowing it all afternoon.
Right.
And so you want to get as much sun as possible for any garden. The more sun you have, the better garden you will have.
I wanted to ask you about, I think I've heard the term once used, planting partners, where it's, maybe you can plant corn, but then around the base of the corn you might plant like green beans or something like that, so that you can best maximize and utilize that space. Do you guys have any recommendations as far as things you can do, or do you know if Dick's done any videos on that?
There's all sorts of different companion plants, both for preventing insects and for getting the maximum amount of production out of your garden. There is one that Richard's very fond of called the 4-foot gardening, and I'm not really knowledgeable of them because I always had plenty of space to plant a garden. But there are a lot of things you can do to maximize the space. Vertical gardening, for instance, instead of planting a bush bean, you might want to plant a pole bean that will climb up a trellis, and you will pick the beans off the trellis.
Right.
Like I was talking with the zucchini, cucumbers, you can do the same thing, vertical gardening. And so depending upon how much effort you want to put into it, there's a lot of things you can do. Now, anytime you want to maximize the space means you're probably going to be putting more time into gardening, as opposed to just leaving it grow where it wants to.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And don't plant a pole bean in your garden if you want to don't want to chase the beans all over the garden. We had one individual that bought what he thought was Blue Lake bush bean, and it would happen to be Blue Lake pole bean, and he went away on vacation and had beans growing throughout his garden.
I'll have a question about that here in a minute, but before we get to that, let's go ahead and go back to the phones. We got a call on line 1. Hello, caller. You're on with the Garden Doctor.
Yes. I have a question for grubs, for putting GrubX down. When is the best time to put that application down? Right now, do you think, or?
I would say that you're maybe a couple weeks out. You want to do it when the grubs are closest to the surface of the ground, and so usually it's going to be the first to the middle of May when you want to put the GrubX down.
Okay. All right. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
GrubX, just grubs? Work with, what's the purpose of that?
Well, because grubs are a flying insect,
Right.
and they lay their eggs, they go migrate into the ground, and then they come to the surface in the spring of the year. And so what you're trying to do is time it so that the chemical, the herbicide, the pesticide will kill the grubs when they come from the ground. And so you're timing as to when to put down the GrubX.
There you go. So don't want to hit it too soon or you waste it.
That's right. You want to hit it when you can get the maximum out of the pesticide.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's go back real quick. We got, actually, what am I saying? We're almost out of time. I'll ask you my question about beans afterwards, off air.
Okay.
But we are unfortunately out of time. Let's remind everybody how they find Jung and Jung's Garden Center.
Okay, Jung's is located in a number of places. The one that most people are familiar with is the one in Randolph. And Randolph is open 8 to 5 Monday through Saturday, and we're closed on Sunday. We also have a Sun Prairie location, which is very easy to find. It's the first exit off as you get to Sun Prairie. And the other garden centers are open 9 to 6 Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 on Saturday, and 10 to 4 on Sunday. And so we have 6 garden centers now. We have the one in Randolph, the one in Sun Prairie, 2 in Madison, 1 in Stoughton, and 1 in Stevens Point. And so any of them will carry the same items, and all of them have the bare root sale going on now.
Awesome. And I have a number written down here, 920-326-5672, if you want to call and ask any questions of the team over there at Jung's. Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in today and for filling in for Dick. I think you did a phenomenal job. Let him know if he wants to get the other knee replaced. We know you got a replacement here.
I think he'll think differently when he wants to do the other knee.
Well, thanks
Thank
for
you
coming
much.
on. Thank you. This has been a paid program. The advice and opinions expressed on the program are solely that of Jung's Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands.